Welcome, everybody, to the Leadership HMM podcast. I'm your host, Chief Talent Officer at Leadership Has No Mantra, Edwin Medina. And today I'm joined by Philip Alexander Cunningham. He is the lead consultant at the Academy of Professional Engagement and co-founder of Yama Health. Thanks for joining us, Phil.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Yeah, awesome. So really, I want to talk about just like the personas, like different personas within leadership. And more importantly, which ones are the right ones, which ones are the ones to look out for, and just really getting leaders to understand that they need to be human more they need to be perfect. So just in your opinion, throughout your vast experience, what have you seen kind of like the different personas that leaders take on?
Yeah, so I've worked probably going on 2 decades now, and I've seen a ton of different leaders, right? And if I were to break these down into like three different buckets, specifically like three different buckets that focus on, outcomes inside of an organization or outcomes inside of a team. I think the first bucket that you'll usually see will be the results-oriented leader that really pushes to like ultimately get things done at the end of the day. And inside of every organization, the goal is to ultimately get outcomes, whether that is for folks to sell more of whatever the widget is, or for folks to service more people, or basically just the person that at the end of the day is only thinking about the bottom line to basically do better than what they did last year or the quarter before, or even like the month before or the day before, right? You see this a lot in sales organizations where, the bottom line is what matters. It doesn't even matter like how you get it done, but you have to get it done, right? And sometimes that's super important. The second group that I've seen specifically with leaders are those service oriented or even servant leaders, right? And these folks have this huge opportunity and have consistently shown inside organizations the ability to get the best out of people. But there's also like a dark side to the servant leader, because sometimes people like to think that a servant leader is just like sometimes a pushover, right? Because they lean so heavily into making sure that their team has everything they need in order to be successful. And sometimes they take approach to teams where they accept less than perfect performance. But there also is a huge opportunity in servant leadership to be able to create an environment that allows people to have enough psychological safety. And by psychological safety, I mean like the idea that you can make a mistake and you will not get backlash from that said mistake. But with servant leaders, they create an environment where people can go out, learn, do things, and try new things, right? And then finally, there's the I probably have the wrong word for this, right? But there is the kind of like the tyrant leader, right? And this particular type of leader strikes fear in the heart of their team. But also sometimes in striking fear in the heart of their team, they are able to get tremendous results out of the people who follow them. So there is a light and a dark side to all of these types of leadership sides, or even say just a pros and cons to both sides of leadership, right? And I think it's important for leaders to begin to understand that certain types of situations like need certain types of leadership, right? And it's important for you to have the flexibility, especially now with the world changing so much, to be able to like tap into the different cons and pros of every different type of leadership. So yeah, those are just some of the buckets. So yeah.
Yeah, so you touched on three personas there that that I want to focus in on. One you talked about like the competitive individual, like no matter what is going to get done, and you talked about the tyrant. And I think those two sometimes kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
I think there's a healthy competitiveness and there's an unhealthy competitiveness, and I think that's when you start going into the tyrant space. So from that standpoint, I think that kind of leads into where you get into some kind of perfectionist syndrome. I'm the leader, I got to be perfect, I got to hit these numbers, and I'm going to get there by all means necessary. So throughout your career, can you talk a little bit about when you coach some leaders in regards to their perfectionist syndrome and the vibe or the environment that it was creating around them and their teams?
Yeah, so I'm actually glad that you brought this question up. So that's part of the reason I actually started the Academy of Professional Engagement, is because in reality, I remember being a really, really bad leader, right? And I didn't know that I was a bad leader until after I was out of that specific role, and I did some self-reflection and got really clear on the things that I did right and also the things that I did wrong. But there was this sense of perfectionism that I had to have, or felt like I had to have at the time. And like, in an effort just to create some clarity around the definition behind perfectionism, when I say perfectionism in this particular context, it is the irrational need for flawlessness and a persistent sense of dissatisfaction, even when you've achieved a specific goal, right? And so, to like break that down in like simple terms, it's that, you have this unrealistic goal, you hit the goal, and you still don't think that you did good enough. And you always feel like you are in a position where you have to be perfect, right? You have to say the right thing. You have to show up in the right way. You have to wear a certain type of clothes. You have to make sure that you inspire your team at all times, and that you have to have all the answers, right? And the reality is, this happens a lot with new leaders, especially when they're in those first big jobs and they think they have to like know everything about everything and have all the answers to every single question. I remember my first time leading a team, I actually led a group of more experienced professionals, and I literally was handcuffing my team because I felt like I had to have not only the strategy, but the answers. And so at some point, someone had to come to me and be like, Phil, you do know that we know how to do this work, right? Sometimes your job is just to get us the resources
Absolutely.
and give me your perspective in all of this, right? I think the second type of leader, or well, there's three types of leaders when I think about perfectionism from a perspective of leadership, right? And the first is just like that self-focused leader. And that's the perfectionism that is focused on you performing as high as you possibly can at all times, right? And again, I keep saying that there's a balance, right? It's important for you to have a drive to be able to get really great results, but it's also really important for you to have a balance to know that if you do not perform at the highest level, but you still get the results, that is good. And you should ultimately create this environment of like incremental, continuous improvement instead of every time I go out, I'm knocking it out the park, right? The second type of group, though, is actually like the environmental pressure for perfectionism. And that usually comes from a leader that you are following that creates an environment where you feel like you always have to show up as perfect in that specific environment, right? And the reason that this can be scary and this can be like harmful to an organization is because poop rolls downhill. So usually if you are
Absolutely.
if you are with a specific type of leader that is putting the pressure on you to be perfect, right? You ultimately will be putting the pressure on your team to be perfect. And so now your team feels like they can't make mistakes or be innovative, or feels just the daily stress of this pursuit of perfection without actually like room to make mistakes, or even to have fun
Yep.
inside of the work that they do every day, right? But where that actually comes from, that like environmental pressure actually comes from this this idea that you are not good enough if you are not performing at a high level, right? And so you internalize the outcomes of the work that sometimes you may not even have control over said outcome. And there are opportunities where you can be as good as you can be and still not get the outcome that you ultimately were looking for. And so this environmental pressure, perfectionism is really a, an idea that I would encourage people to start to look inside and figure out not only where is the pressure coming from, but also why do you feel this specific type of reaction to the pressure that is coming from the outside? Because there's always going to be external factors that have an impact on your performance, but it's important for you to be able to acknowledge what those things are and look at them as information and not always as fact. And then
Yeah.
finally, go ahead. You want me to, you had a follow up to that, or you want me to keep
Yeah,
going?
no, so yeah, I just want to jump in there real quick. So in
Yep.
regards to all those personas, I think I'm asking you a question of where you personally like Drew, where you feel like you need to have all the answers and stuff like that. I think people also fall into this like leadership persona of what they saw like in a movie, like
Yep.
they either watch war movies, they watch like these sports movies, or they're real deep into sports and they think like leaders have to be a certain type of way, leaders have to carry a team, they have to
Yeah.
drop 42 points a night. And I think what they fail to realize is if you look at it from a statistical
Statistical
standpoint,
standpoint. Yeah.
is that we'll just take basketball. Like if you're shooting
The mom mentality.
50% from the field, like
Yeah.
you're doing outstanding and you're
You
still
are.
missing half your shots,
Indeed.
and I think that doesn't sink into people, or if it's in baseball, and if you're batting close to 300,
300. You're a
that
Hall of
that
Famer.
means, yeah, you're a Hall of Famer, but you missed 70% of your at
Yeah.
bats. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. So it's super funny that you bring that up, right? Because I do think that in media and just in life, we create personas and we create narratives, specifically in sports, right? We think about the Mamba mentality, where Kobe was in constant pursuit of perfection, right? But I think the other side of the said story is that Kobe knew that even while you were pushing for perfection, there was always going to be failure, and that was part of the process,
Yeah, that's good.
right? And I think that as we start to show up as leaders, we think that we have to show up and be 100% all the time. And the reality is, you don't have to. It actually takes some of the pressure off of you, which creates this ability for you to be able to innovate. When you know that you can miss a shot, when you know that you have the green light as a leader, you can do things that you would normally not do because you know that
Absolutely.
you'll still get another rep, right? And so I love Simon Sinek, right? And he talks about this idea of the infinite game, right? And we're not playing this finite game where there are only so many resources and there's only so much time for us to do it as right as we could possibly do. Because the reality is, because we show up to work every day and will constantly show up to work or to our families or to our friends, we do get this opportunity to go out and experiment and see how we can be as good as we can be with the knowledge that we have at the moment. Here's the best part of it, though, is that even when you show up as your best and you fail, you learn from that, from the moment, and then you get to show up
Absolutely.
again with that new experience and with that new knowledge to be able to like actually do it better the next time. Um, this idea of experience, right, having a huge impact and a huge, like, I'm not even gonna say it's like, so experience creates this bank of knowledge when you go into different situations that allows you to adjust in real time, that perfectionism stops people from being able to do, right? Because when you feel like you have to be perfect in this specific moment, when things change like they always do, you can't call an audible because you already had a game plan for a specific set of outcomes or a specific set of situations. But when the situation changes and you are focused on perfectionism, you're not even able to like adjust because you are so focused on an outcome that no longer is even relevant in this specific situation. So yeah, I will say this about my own leadership journey, right? I remember being really young, having a big job, thinking that I had to have all the answers. And there will be moments, even in meetings, like in real time adjustments that I needed to make that I would not make because it didn't match my notes. Right. So
Yep.
now I'm sitting here looking crazy. I got high level of
Yeah,
anxiety. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do because I thought that I had to be perfect in this particular moment. Once I figured out that I didn't have to be perfect, that sometimes you can make mistakes and sometimes you can come back and admit that you made the mistake and then be like, okay, I really messed that one up. Right. But in knowing that I messed that one up, here's what I learned from this specific situation. I was able to come back stronger. I was able to adjust to the situations better. I was able to even build in like enough wiggle room for what potentially could be just life happening, right? And
absolutely.
it made a big difference in just the complete approach to leadership.
And when you do that, when you're able to admit to your mistakes, I think leaders feel to realize like your trust level and your respectability like gets even
Goes to the
higher.
roof.
Yeah,
So I want to talk about that specifically, right? Because people don't, I think that there's this idea, again, this goes back to the narrative that we talk about with leaders, is that you get the respect because you have the answers. But the reality is you get the respect because you do what is necessary for your team to be able to get the best results, right? Also, sometimes that means that you have to take a step back and be like, I don't know. You help me. You're the expert in this particular situation. My job as the leader is to make the final decision. But I do need you as the member of my team to give me insight into what is actually happening in real life. Leaders don't always learn this lesson. leaders sometimes find themselves in situations where, as they have consistently created this environment where they always have the answers, then nobody else who may have even better answers even like shares their opinion or their perspective. And so now you have leaders making decisions. This happens a lot to CEOs. Executives are in a bubble of sorts because nobody tells them the truth, because they are afraid of the outcome of them actually telling them the truth. So yeah,
Absolutely.
it's super important for you to be able to create an environment where people can tell you the truth and you accept that truth in order to be able to get the best outcomes most consistently.
Oh, absolutely. And I think to your point also is and I'm gonna take it from a, you know, from a military perspective, even though we try to take business strategy and it really alludes to military strategy. So we have like goals, we have a strategy, we have tactics, like we have all these military terms that are embedded into the business.
Into
But
business. Yeah.
um whenever you look out throughout history where it was Alexander the Great, the way he leveraged the information like he got from his generals, Napoleon was huge. He would walk the line and he would listen to the frontline troops before he listened to what his generals and majors and colonels were telling them, because he knew that's where the truth telling was happening, and that's the
Indeed.
information that he needed to make good decisions based on the information, the candid information, you know, that he was receiving in.
Yeah.
And even Colin Powell was the same way, whether he was in Vietnam or in the first Gulf War. He said 70% of the time my frontline troops had the right answer. So he'd always listen to them. And not that he was devaluing anything that he was getting, you know, from his officers, but he knew all the truth telling was happening in the front lines. And as long as those people were candid, he was able to make sound decisions based on that candid, you know, feedback and information.
Yeah. And to even take this back to the idea of humanity, right? Is that in order for you to be able to get the truth from your teams, you have to show up as a human. Because if you show up as an officer, if you show up as like you see these, right? You see these bars, right? You can't even talk to me in a certain kind of way. I need you to straighten up every time I show up, right? Then people won't tell you the truth.
Yep.
So here's a question then. I really want to ask you this one. As we continue down this road, is what are some of the lookouts, right, for leaders um when they find themselves in this space of perfectionism? What are some of the lookouts?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna take the play off what you were saying in regards to like when you point at your rank, you know, like in the military. And
Yeah.
you know, like the good leaders know that by default, your rank makes you the de facto leader. You know, like you don't have to go around like, you know, like rubbing on your rank, making sure everyone sees it because it's nice and shiny. But it's the same thing in corporate America. Like if you have a director title, if you have a manager title, and if you have direct reports, those direct reports know they're getting paid to be a part of your team. So
Indeed.
you walking into the room always constantly you know, flexing your title, your rank or something like that, that's a huge lookout. Like you have to understand, I don't have to keep reminding people that I'm in charge. Like they know
I'm in
it, you
charge.
know. Yeah, they know I'm in charge. So let's make lemonade. The other, you know, the other big part of that is also understanding how far your voice carries. And the higher up you go, the further your voice carries, you know.
Yeah.
So like great generals, great
That's
directors,
good.
great CEOs, they'll ask questions, they'll ask the necessary questions, and even though they have the answer to them, they'll shut up after that and they'll listen to everything that the team is saying to either make sure like, hey, we're on track, or I didn't even think about that, that's a great idea. But they remain quiet most of the time, because the moment they say something, the moment they interject, the moment I throw out an idea, or if I'm in the military, the moment I say, hey, we're going, you know, we're going this way, everybody let's move, they're all going to go there by default, regardless
Yep.
if the dude in the back was like, no, like we shouldn't go that way, that's a trap, you know, let's go east instead, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So I think going in there and understanding, like, just, I know I'm the leader, they know I'm the leader, but at the same time, I don't want to kill creativity, I don't want to kill their development, and I don't want to, most importantly, kill their buy-in into the mission, whether it's in corporate America or the military, is the
Yeah.
best way to go into it and just build like a collaborative environment. But most importantly, everyone feels like they have skin in the game, but they're also being developed, you know, and
Yeah.
now they're being challenged to make a good decision in front, you know, like in front of the leader that's going to affect the entire team. And that's a huge leadership lesson in and of itself. to grow in indirect leadership before you actually get into a good leadership role.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I think you said something that like really just struck a chord with me when you said that executive leaders, or the higher you go, the further your voice carries. I found that really great leaders do a lot more listening, and they may spend more time like going through the process of decision making out loud in private, right? They have a group of people that they can brainstorm with, that are trusted, that understand the authority of said position, but also creates for them a sounding board for them to think through the specific strategy that they need to think through in order to be able to get the best outcomes, right? Because sometimes, and I have seen this, and I've coached some executives through this, sometimes executives think out loud with their team present, and they think that those are orders in order for them to go forward.
Exactly.
And so when they leave the room, they think that they have like direction, but in actuality, they were brainstorming, but the executive didn't know that what they ultimately were doing in thinking through the idea was actually creating demand for their team to like go out and start to work. And so it's super
Absolutely.
important for a leader to be intentional in how they show up and what they say in said rooms. And sometimes when they mess that up, right? If they don't know how far their voice carries, if they're like really early in their career as a CEO or senior executive, they have to go back and like make that right. They'll say like, I may have taken a misstep right here, because what I meant when I said this was like, here's an idea, and I didn't preface that statement in advance. So now you think that you're supposed to go forward with that. I've made this mistake several times.
Exactly.
It took me a little time to figure that out. But yeah, that is,
And
oh my gosh, that's a great point.
the moment you share that idea, to your point, it's not an idea anymore. That's
Right.
the direction we're going.
Correct.
It just kills the creative process.
Yeah, it does. That's, oh
So
my gosh, that's good.
throughout the leaders that you've coached, what's one of the ways that you've helped somebody get past like this perfectionist syndrome that they need to have as a leader?
I think this is going to sound really simple, but I mean, I sit down with some leaders. I'm actually sitting down with a leader right now who leads a health system in Cincinnati, Ohio. And she's been in her role for 3 years. She is in the process of building out her next strategic plan. And in the strategic plan, her goal is to be able to like grow her lines of business significantly, really, really fast, right? But she also has like some folks internally who are actively trying to undermine her authority and leadership. And part of it is because she feels like she has had to have all the right answers all the time, because she was coming into an organization that traditionally had been successful, but now was going in a new direction. So she felt like she had to have perfect performance every single time out, right? And so the question I asked was, why do you feel like you have to be perfect? And like I kept asking why. And then at one point we got to like the bedrock why, and it was really around this idea of like, if we don't do this well, I won't be good enough. And if I'm not good enough, the people won't follow me. And if the people won't follow me, we won't get the outcomes, right? So lots of times with executives, and this happens the higher you go inside an organization,
Yep.
is that it becomes more and more isolated, and you stop hearing as much of the truth, and you feel the pressure of performance so high that you attach that performance to your self-worth. And as you're thinking about this idea of like, if we don't get this right, I'm not a good person, or if we make a mistake here, everything is going to fall apart. It creates all of this unsaid pressure that could be real or could be imagined, right? And I think sometimes just asking yourself why do I feel this way in this particular situation, has a huge impact on how you approach the situation, right? Sometimes I go through this exercise of like, what is the worst that could happen, right? In a specific situation, there's a leader who's going into a big meeting with the board, right? And I'm like, here's what you want to get across. Here are the ultimate goals for this said conversation. But this again is one conversation. What is the worst that could possibly happen in this situation if everything goes awry? and you plan for that. And if it does go awry, you ultimately create an opportunity in your brain to go through solutions that would happen if these things do like completely blow up, right? You're just gonna have to, it's gonna be work and it's gonna be hard. There's gonna be things that you're gonna have to do strategically in order to be able to like bring the group back together to get everybody back in line for where it is that you want to go. But at the end of the day, this one meeting will not make or break your career. But this is like multiple meetings, multiple times where you show up that are going to ultimately make or break your career, build your brand, build trust internally. And it's the ability to show up as a human in all of these different spaces that allow you to ultimately get the best outcomes at the end of the day and have a fulfilling career. I
Yeah,
think,
man.
yeah. Sorry. I was like,
Yeah, no,
go
no,
ahead.
no, you're good. So that I just wanted to touch on exactly what you just said, because when you were talking, man, two things popped in my head. One is that's the pressure of in the military, it's called like the burden of command. Is
Mm,
that this one decision that I make could either cost people their lives or it could win us the battle.
yeah.
The thing is that great leaders, what they do is they bring everybody in and it lifts that burden up. So now all of us carry that burden. It's not just
Indeed.
me carrying that burden. And
Yeah.
I think that's an important lesson they got to get over. Two is I was a little bit shell shocked when I started working at Coca-Cola, because I was like,
Mm.
oh snap, I'm at Coca-Cola.
This is
Like,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
like man, this is big time right here. This is the big leagues, the big stage, whatever you want to
Yep.
call it. And
Yep.
man, at first I was all like, I can't make mistakes. Like, this is big time. This is Coca-Cola. And as I got there, what I learned and what relieved that stress is, this company's been around for over 100 years. The formula is not changing, and
Yeah.
it basically sells itself.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to bankrupt the company in any kind of way,
Right.
So and that kind of gave me some stress and alleviated some stress in the sense of I'm not I'm not going to hurt anything, but
Yeah.
I will hinder the process if I'm just so caught up in the emotion of being stressed out, of needing to make the right choice, and just
Indeed.
knowing, hey, Coke's not going to fail based on Edwin's decision. Really opened it up, man, for me. For me to do what I do there.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really great point. It brings me back to this conversation I had with one of my mentors when I was at McGraw, because that was my first big job, right? McGraw Hill, top 3 publishers in the world. I'm thinking that like my job is to sell all the books that will impact the bottom line of the organization, right? This is a $4 or $5 billion company at the time, right? So my one role is not going to impact the complete bottom line in a decision that I make in a marketing meeting on December 22nd, right? But I asked the question for my mentor who worked at McGraw at the time. He was the senior vice president of sales. I asked the question, well, what if I just mess it up? He says, how would you mess it up? And I was like, well, what if I go in the meeting and I say the wrong thing? He was like, well, we'll go back in the meeting the next day and we'll say something different. And it was like, in that moment, right? I'm thinking that this one meeting is going to throw everything, like it's going to make or break my career. And he just like, he took the pressure off of me and was like, this is just a moment that goes along with a bunch of other moments that will create your body of work. And it literally just changed my perspective on how I showed up for the big meetings, right? I didn't
Absolutely.
have to be perfect anymore. So and I think that points to the idea of leadership creating an environment for young executives, new executives, or just their teams to be able to like go in there and do your best, right?
Yep.
And the fear that you have is sometimes unwarranted. Sometimes the fear is just to prepare you, right? To put you in a space where
Absolutely.
like it's signaling to you that you need to go as hard as you possibly can to be prepared for this moment. But again, this is just a moment. There'll be a million other moments. And all of those moments will make up your body of work. So yeah, that's oh yeah, this is good.
No, no, that was good. So man, I just wanted to take the last few minutes just to thank you, not so much for joining the podcast, but also want to commend you. You're one of the few people that I'll know will drop off the grid and then they come back like 10 times better. I just think that goes to show not just your work ethic, but your determination, your fortitude to, no matter whatever hurdles you get put in front of you, you seem to jump right over them, overcome it, and then when you reappear again, you know, you're different Phil, but you're a better Phil. And I just commend you for that. And it also gives me it gives me the determination, you know, and the fortitude, you know, to keep going, because I have a personal you know, example right in front of me of somebody who will drop off the grid, and then boom, you know, those 2 years that they were behind the curtains, man, they were working. And it just gives me confidence, you know, in what I'm trying to accomplish as well. So I just want to thank you for that.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate you having me. I mean, our relationship goes way back. We've known each other for close to what, a decade now?
Yeah.
Maybe longer, maybe like 12, 13 years. And I will say that I have watched as you, like when we first met, like you were a shining example of a really great professional. But I think now, as I watch you, you are not only an example of like a great leader and professional, but also someone who's like clear on where they're going and like willing to take the risk to get there. Right. And there's so many people who get to the end and are like, man, I wish I would have. I don't see that with you. Right. I see you like you take the risk, you prepare for whatever risk is in front of you, you give your best performance every single time out, and you consistently, continuously adjust for just higher levels of like of performance. So like as much as you feel like I'm inspiring you, like I am completely inspired by you and all the things that you've been able to do, not only as a professional, but also like as a father, as a, you know what I mean, a business person, as just a person that is just doing his best work. So thank you for having me. I'm humbled and
Yep.
I
Thank you.
appreciate this. Yeah.